That means. We're on the top here, page Dalet, on the second paragraph. Nechleku Rishonim imamirim tmuras ra bara. What does that mean? I guess it means that you have a negative on both sides, on the Behemas Kodesh and the Behemas Chulun. Ainu, Behemas Hegdesh Balas Mum, Al Balas, Al Behemas Chulun Balas Mum. You're like two strikes against. So let's say that the Behemas Hegdesh is now considered like Kedusha's Domim, and on the Chulun side, the maximum Kedusha level it could achieve would be Kedusha's Domim. So until now, we spoke about the fact that somewhere in this Maisa Torah, there's some potential for Kedusha's Haguf. Either Behemas Hegdesh, let's say, was once, Kidsho, and then at the end it became a Balas Mum, and we said there was some vestige of Kedusha's Haguf in the Behema, or the Behemas Chulin is a Tam. But now we have a kind of low level of Tmura on the side of the Behemas Hegdesh because it's a Balas Mum. And also the Chulin doesn't even have the potential to become Kadosh B'Kedushas Haguf because the Behemas Chulin is the Balas Mum. So in such a case, we have machlokes as to whether or not that would qualify as a Maisa Tmura. Just see if you get anything on the bottom. It should say Mem Ches, is that correct? Shitas Rashi she'ein memim, that Tosfos spoke. Rashi al Torah, it seems to contradict Rashi in Mistake. Behemas Hegdesh shekodam hakedoshas muma. As we said, there's a vestige of Kedushas Haguf because at one point in time it had a full-fledged Kedushas Haguf. Otzet Tmura afli achar pidyona. Lefi shadayim yesh ba das Kedusha Surah begiza v'avod. We have now a case of Pidyon Sulei HaMukdash. So we have Sulei HaMukdash. It's no longer kosher, and he does a Pidyon. And now there's a vestige of its original status of Kedusha in the form of an Isur Giza v'avod. So you're not allowed to shear off its wool, and you're not allowed to do avoda and work the animal even after Pidyon. So imagine, in a sense, we're going down two levels. Number one, we go down one level because it's a balas mum and it's invalid for the mizbeach, and now we're going down another level because I was already podeh the hegdesh of this behemas balas mum, and now I transferred that kedusha over to Mos, but nevertheless, the animal itself still retains some vestige of its original status as Hegdesh, and its Kedusha expresses itself because it generates an Isur Giza V'Avoda, and that gives you a tangible Nafkamina, L'Halacha L'Maisa, with its status of Kedusha from its original state before it became a Balas Mum and before the Pidyon. So despite the fact that it was blemished, and that reduced its Kedusha down to a Hegdish of Kedusha's Domin, such that now you can be poded. Then we have another level in which we strip it of its Kedusha, of its Hegdish status through Pidyon, but nevertheless, it is still, in a certain sense, royal mizbeach, not royal mizbeach, but it has a vestige of its kedusha, which generates an Isur Giza V'Avoda, and that itself is enough to create a Maisa Tmura. Again, I'm assuming now that the behemoth's chulin is a tongue, a balas, is a tmima. Now, what does he have here in footnote S? This is a sugya in Bechoros. How do you like that? Now we have an overlap of two mesechtas of Kodshim. One is Tmura and the other is Chatos HaMeso. Enon Osim Tmura. If I'm not mistaken, there are 5 categories of Chatos HaMeso. So let's say the classic case of Chatos HaMesos is in a case of Mesu Baleho. Let's say you have Ruvain was mafresh a carbon chatas because he violated the Isur Kares B'Shogeg, and after being mafresh the chatas, he dies. And the law is in such a case that you don't bring the carbon chatas because the whole purpose of this chatas is to bring a kapara for Ruvain. So Ruvain died, and he's not there to bring his chatas. That chatas will die without being brought on the path. So in such a case, enon osos mura. So it's not like a balas mum, which we said you could still do a ma'aseh tur with a balas mum, because the original designation lemizbech is still alive and well to some extent. And we saw even in Isra Avod even after Pidyon. But a chatas amesos is completely excluded from any status of Hagdish. And it's even mufka, it's excluded from a ma'aseh tmura. Ach chatos haroos osos tmura. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you a specific case. Nun aleph. We didn't get to Nun aleph, did we? Oh yeah, Nun beis. Veila alon masai dinam lamisa or masai up. So he's going to hopefully fill in for us the missing details. We can anticipate it coming later on. I'm looking here to see if I can find a good example of ROAS. Does anybody see such a thing? He says. It's on this page, it's on another page. Oh, we have a case here, which we'll get to on page 12, I think, called Flad Balas Mu. Let's say, for example, you have a carbon ola, and now becomes a balas mum, that carbon ola gives birth to a vlad. The halacha is that the vlad has a different status than its mother. How so? The mother, right? The mother is obviously excluded from the mizbeach. She's a balas mum. The vlad is a vlad of a balas mum. That vlad is excluded from the mizbeach. But there still is a mizbeach status to the vlad of a balas mum. Why? Because the status of the vlad of a balas mum is yira achistaiv. So now the vlad itself becomes a balas mum. And then we sell it on the open market for a tamin, for an ola. Right? The original status of the mother was an ola. The mother became a balas mum and gave birth to a vlad. So the mother herself is excluded from the mizbeach, but the vlad has a quasi mizbeach status in the sense that if the vlad is yirachi stuff becomes a balas mum, then we sell the animal and we bring the one that we buy as a carbon olam. Again, I'm just giving you an example of an olam, meaning of the original carbon. That's called yirachi style. He follows, we're one step removed from a balmum because it's the vlad of a balmum. And the vlad of a balmum will have a, so to speak, a higher level of a relationship of hegdish to the mizbeach than the balmum itself, than the mother itself, the balas mum. And that's called yirachi style. Let's go back to our paragraph here. I just want to fix something here on the screen. He says the following. Hatos ha-mesos, which absolutely lose their status completely. It's like hulu. Eno osos tmura. So I mean, for a Maisa tmura, you don't need a full-fledged behemah lemizbeach with a hegdesh, a full-fledged hegdesh. We said that you could be meimer even from a balas mum. But a chatos ha-mesos is even lower than a balas mum. It's completely excluded from the mizbeach, period. It will die and that's it. It's basically like a behemoth chulu. So we'll make a provincial, temporary equation here between chatos ha-mesos and a behemoth chulu. Again, I don't know if that's correct, but for the time being, let's operate with that equation. So you can't do a tmur, obviously, with a behemoth chulu. But now we get to something called chatos haroas. So that's a vlad of a balas mum. Also tmura. Yeah, because now I think what we're doing is we're equating a chatos haroas with a behemoth balas mum. What did we say about a behemoth balas mum? That was on page Gimel. Where's page Gimel here? Here. Oh, here we said that tov bara or rabit tov. And therefore, darshu chachamim shememirim behemoth hegdesh balas mum. In the case of Kadma Gdeshas Mum. And that for sure, if the behemoth chulin is a tmima. We said if there's two strikes on both sides, that you have a behemoth hegdesh balas mum on the one side, and you have a behemoth chulin balas mum on the other side, then there's no tmura. But if on the other hand, you have on the one side a behemoth balas mum, and on the other side you have a behemoth chulin tmima, then there is a maisa tmura, albeit on a low level. It's not a smooth, atchila kind of situation because it's limited to a behemoth chulin that's a tmima. Now we get to the case of roas. You have two extremes here. On one extreme, you have a psul of balas mum, and there it does lend itself to a maisa. On the other extreme, you have something called a chatos hamesos, which loses its entire status, and it's called a behemoth chulin for our purpose. And there's no possibility of a maisa. In the middle, between the two extremes, you have something called chatos haros. And I have a feeling that the status of chatos haros is even beyond that of a balas mum. Because a balas mum, we said, although it does lend itself to maisa tmura, but we have certain conditions that have to be met. It's not glat, it's like a fallback position, second tier, as you would say, Steve, right? Second tier. So balas mum is a second tier. Now, I'm assuming that, again, this is all, Beiravon Mugbal, that a chatas haros has a first tier status of a maisa tmura. Because he says osos tmura, he doesn't qualify. He doesn't say osos tmura the same way that a balas mum would be osos tmura. He just says glat, straight away he says osos tmura. It could be there are no limitations and restrictions in the case of a chatos haros. And that would be supported by the fact that, let's say, for example, if you have a vlad of a behemas balas mum, and the status of the vlad is such that yirat she'istayev, if that vlad now gives birth to another vlad, correct? Let's go over this one more time. A vlad of a balmum that has a vlad, right? It's like the grandchild, the granddaughter of the balas mum. Just 1 second. So the vlad and I just want to get this again. Vlad of a balmum. Vlad of a balmum. Let's say it's yirat she'istayev. Now the vlad of a balmum became a balmum. Yimocher. We sell it. And the monies that are used to sell the vlad of a balmum are now designated for the same identical carbon as the mother of this vlad balmum. You follow? So the aim who became a balas mum was an ola, for example. The vlad of that aim is yirat she'istayev, and after it becomes a balmum, we sell it for a carbon olam, if you follow me. So that's a higher level than the mother herself. You follow, we're one step removed from the psul of balmum in the case of a vlad of a balmum. and it's Yirachi Stoyev, although we're not going to bring the Vlad of a Balmum on the Mizbeach, we're going to wait till the Vlad of the Balmum becomes a Balmum, but nevertheless it has a high status in that we could sell it for the original card. And now we could do a Maisa Tmura on Yirachi Stoyev. Again, he gives the example of a Chatos. I don't know why. I mean, maybe because he's contrasting it to a Chatos HaMesos, which has the status of a Be'emes Kulin and is completely excluded from Tmur. Rabbanos hapsulim b'psul treif kigon shehigdish v'achkach nitrifa behema. So this is again, I think, one step worse, if you will, lower on the totem pole, the tier, than a balas mum. It's a treifa. V'chein Charban apostle b'psul yotzei dofen. Kigon shehigdish ubar the achkach yotza derech dofen imo. Okay, this you have to be a baki Kodshim for this. He says in Nudalid Alocha ein chala kedusha la treifa al yotzei dofen. Lefichach, you can't be magdish a treifa or yotzei dofen. Lefichach lo yitzuyer din zeh ba'ofen shehigdish the achakach nases treifa yotzei dofen. So you were magdish and ubar, and then it became a yotzei dofen, right? What do we call it? A cesarean birth, right? It didn't go through the birth canal. V'chein v'lodos hakodshim sheim kilayim otumtum v'androgynous. In all these cases, enam osim tmura. So let's go through them one by one. We have the first case of a yotzei, of a treifa. So we said that since at the time that he was magdish the animal, it was not a balas mum. Therefore, later after the Akadosha, when it became a balas mum, it still has a vestige of its status that it had before it became a balas mum of Kodshim Mizbeach, and therefore lends itself to Tmura even after it became a Baal Mum, because there was an original moment of time in which there was a Hakadosh and it was a Tmima. Now we have a case where it's Magdish Be'ema, and instead of becoming a Baal Mum, it became what? A Treifa. That's already a lower tier. And there's no Maisa Tmura on a Treifa. Now I'm wondering again, are there any dinim that indicate that there's a vestige of the original Kedushas Mizbeach in the case of a treifa? It was not a treifa when it was magdish, it became a treifa subsequent to the Hegdish. Like, for example, we said in the case of a balas mum that even after pidyon of a balas mum, it still is an Isur Gizav Avoda. Does that halacha apply to the case of a treifa? I don't know. I mean, I'm in the dark over here. You have to really know Kodshim. Let's assume, just for argument's sake, to make life easier for ourselves, that there's no din of Isur Gizav Avoda on an animal that became a treifa. It doesn't lend itself to a Maisa Tmura. It's reminiscent of Chatos HaMeis. I don't know. Now we have a case where the animal became a Yotzei Dofen. It came out of the stomach of the animal rather than the uterus of the animal. And he pointed out in the footnote, you could only have an animal become a Yotzei Dofen if he was Magdish before it became a Yotzei Dofen, because he can't be Magdish a Yotzei Dofen, or you can't be Magdish a Treif. Now he has a third case, Lados Kodshim Shem Kilayim Otumtum Vadrogus. So again, I'm getting the impression that he was Magdish the animal. Wait a minute, he can't say that he was Magdish before it became Kilayim. He had kilayim, right? So you mixed breeded two animals of different species that you aren't allowed to mix breed. And the vlad that's born to such a mixture is called kilayim. So now you have a lot of kilayim, if I understand correctly. Let's just see. Lodos hakodshim shehem kilayim. What does it mean? The mother was kilayim? How do you interpret these words? How do you translate? Nun hey, does he add anything here? Shita says over him. What does he mean? The Shita says over Lodos hakodshim. So wait a minute. We didn't even discuss Vlad hakodshim. So he's saying that there's one, we didn't even discuss this here. Apparently there's a Shita that the Vlad of Kodshim also has the status of its mother and therefore Osim Tmura. But now, what happened to the Vlados HaKodshim? Shehem Kilayim. So if I understand correctly, it means that there was a crossbreeding in the previous generation, the mother, and the Vlad of such Kodshim, in general Vlad Kodshim, Ositmur. But here, it's Ein Ositmur. My impression is that the reason why it's Ein Ositmura is because it's Osel in his bath. You can't bring a Vlad, even though it's a Vlad of Kodshim, but you can't bring it on the Mizbeach if the mother was Kilayim. Now, what about Tumtum Vadroigans? I don't know. He doesn't tell you anything about Tumtum Vadroigans. I mean, we know what a Tumtum is. We're not sure if it's a Zohar or a Nekeva. Or in the case of Vadroigans, it has both Simone Nakvus and Simone Zachus simultaneously. I don't know what the status of such an animal is, Lemizbeah. But I'm going to assume again, like we said about Treifa and Yotzei Dofen, that it's excluded from the Mizbeah. And so too the Vlad of Kodshim that were Kalayim is possible in Mizbeah. And then we're going to assume that a Tumtum and Androgen, again, it's the Vlad of a Tumtum Androgen. I don't know how you have such a thing. So in all these cases, there's no Tmura. And in footnote number Nunvav, he quotes Rabbi Lazar in the Mishnah Daf Yud. So for this, we would take out a Kahati in Tmura and look up, you'd have to do a little research to figure out where the Kahati is. Alternatively, you just take out a Gemara Tmura. I have a Gemara Tmura here now. This is my latest edition. This is my chiyuv to buy a shas. I gave two choices. I need one shas piecemeal. I buy a masifta. Okay. They give you the cover opening first time. What do we say? I think it says Yud Zayin. I think all of Tmur is in one volume, right? If you find a Mishnah in Yud Zayin. It says Gemara, so this probably maybe there's it's very hard. No, they just keep it. Oh. If you have any trouble reading it, then go back to the. Anything in the name of Rabbi Eliezer there, Elazar? Okay, what does it say in the name of Elazar? But you have to read it a drop loud.
Rabbi Elazar Omer, lying at Reifa, Treifa, Mayotze, Dofen, Tumtum, Agonios, Lo Kedoshim, Lo Mipach.
Nasim Kedosh.
Matish.
No, Nasim Kedosh. Not made.
Yeah, but does it say anything about Torah there?
Nasim Doshin,
I mean, explain.
Kedushas, Tamura.
It's a Hebrew.
It says Lo Nasim Kedoshim, and then after it says Lo Kedushas Tmura. Is there any translation there in the Masif? Or it just has the bold print without any? Usually the quote of the Mishnah is in bold print and dark print, and then afterwards it has. Is there anything there that's not in dark print?
Haim, Hayu, Amos.
You know what? I'm going to borrow some.
It's such a Hebrew land.
I'm going to take this. If you want to get the article, it's Mura. It'd be a volume of Mura. Right. Yes. Let me just see. I wanted to get some. I know for this it cost me 140 shekel. The price of a sifter went up, by the way. This is from Manny's. My son was able to get. Oh, this is a whole nother pshat. Is that what it says here? He says Einam Osim Tmura. He's saying Himiru Alehem Mibehemas Kodshim. That's exactly the reverse of what we have here in our text. Himiru Alehem Mibehemas Kodshim Lonas Doshim. Here's the same. Im hayu heim behemas kodshim lo makadishim. Ein matfisim. That's the word cloning that we've been using, right? Ein matfisim kedusha al behemas chul. Kolomar ein memirim bahem. There's no ma'aser from them. Let's see if he adds anything. That is Rabbi Elazar. Let's see what he says about Kalayim. Behema shenolda mitayish sheba ala kivsa. I mean, you have to know, maybe the art school will give you the English translation. You have tayish and kivsa. A kivsa is a female lamb. And a tayish, I think, is a male ram. I'm not sure. You have to check that out. In any event, that's called kilayim. Now, this mixture, a crossbreed of a tayish and a kivsa, gave birth to a vlad. That vlad is called kilayim. And this vlad is possible in its bed. Then we have treifa, and a list in the chulin of 18 treifa. The Gemara Menachos on Daf Pei derives from psukim that these animals, which are treifa, are possible in its bed. In a bakar lahotzias atreif. Then we have shalo nolad kedarko el yotza derech dofen imo, and the Bryson chulin derives the psul from kiyulad. In Karbonis it says kiyulad prat liyotze dofen. Okay, then we have a drush in Gemara B'choros. This is mamish all of Kodshim together, one line in the Mishnah. There's a psul of androgynous, sheyesh lo zachrus v'gam nakfus, and the Torah repeats the word zachar in Karbonis twice, and the extra word zachar we derive the psul of tumtum and androgynous. The only comment I would make here is that this is, again, a lower tier than balas mum. There is a ma'isa tmur and a balas mum, but not in these cases, because these cases are simply pasul the mizbeach from the moment that they are born. Either they were born to kilayim of a mixture of a tayish and a kivtza, or it was a yotzei dofen or a tumtum and androgynous. The only case that add here is a little different is treifa. What happened? The animal was born as a treifa. Yeah, but he was magdishit lemizbeach. How was he magdish behemoth treifa? That was the previous note over here. Shehigdish v'achar kach mitzrafa behemoth. The other cases, I think it was born. I was born as kilayim. You can't become kilayim. You have to be kilayim from birth, or tumtum madroigis. But in the cases of Tmura and Yotzei Dofen, there was Hakdasha before it became a treifa, before it became a Yotzei Dofen. So the chiddush is that even though there was Hakdasha, and we said that by Balas Mum, if there was Hakdasha before the Mum, then it does lend itself to a Maisa Tmur, but not in the cases of treifa and Yotzei Dofen. Those are more extreme psula. You follow this, that remove. Again, I don't know about Giza Avoda. I don't want to say something and then I'll look like an idiot if I said the wrong thing. If I'm saying, but if I can say with limited liability, I have a suspicion that the animal becomes a treifa or a yotzei dofen, and there's no vestige of kedusha l'mitzbeach at all, even as far as an Isur Giza Avoda is concerned. And therefore, there's no tmura. And again, when we say there's no tmura, we're going in both directions. You can't be meimer onto one of these categories, or you can't be meimer from one of these categories. Now, what does he add in the next line? Ein memirin, now he adds the other way. Ein memirin al. So you have a behemas Kodshim, which is a balas, a tmima, but you can't be meimer onto a behemas kulin that's either a treifa, kilayim, yotzei dofen, or tumtum madros. So that's what we saw already. We were already tipped off to this. It's here in Nun Zayin. For that, I have to turn to the other side of the page here. Now I have the originals, so I don't even have to do that. Gemara Sham. Let's see where we got up to today. We're up to Ein Memirid, so that we did. We're up to Arovea Van Nirva, correct? Hashem, we'll pick up. To see to what extent Torah is like all of Kodshim together.